All right, so I've competed in over 60 contests in my life. That's a lot of contests, a lot of good times, a lot of bad times. And what I wanted to share with you today was the 3 biggest highlights. I really brings back good memories talking about these 3 things. And these 3 stand out. So memory number 1, when I won my very first show as a 19-year-old, my grandmother was with me. And my grandmother raised me, for those of you who don't know. And I remember it was a tough lineup. There were 10 kids in my class, in the 18 to 19 class. And I remember thinking, I think I'm in the top 5. And they called out 5th place. I thought it wasn't me. I thought maybe I'm 4th. And they called out 4th place. Then they called out 3rd place. And I was like, wow, I'm going to actually make the top 2. And then they called out 2nd place, and it wasn't me. And I went to walk to put my clothes back on because I didn't figure there's any way I could win. I thought I didn't make top 5. Well, then they called 1st place, and it was me. So I turned around, I ran back out there, I went on stage, and I looked down, and the first thing I saw was my grandmother had gotten out of her seat, and she was coming down the aisle, walking toward the stage, and she was cheering, and she was excited, and she had tears in her eyes, and she was very excited. And that was a very, very special moment for me when I was 19 years old that I'll never forget. And that's probably one of the biggest highlights in my career. Number 2, the 2nd biggest highlight. I should say these are in no particular order. When I was in Mr. USA in 1999, I was carrying around my wife's engagement ring with me the whole time, so I was very nervous. And after the show, I had planned on asking her to marry me, so what I was going to do was, we were in California, right? We were on the beach, so I figured I would take her out to the beach in the morning, and then I'd ask her to marry me as the sun was coming up, right? I mean, how romantic is that? The sun's coming up on the beach, I pull the ring out, no way she can say no, right? So I take her out on the beach, I'm sitting there, we're waiting for the sun, and Mary says, "Isn't that the sun coming up over there behind the buildings?" And it hit me all of a sudden. The whole sun rises on one coast and sets on the other. I had it backwards. The sun actually sets over the beach. So I totally missed the ball on that. She ended up giving me a maybe. She didn't say yes, she ended up giving me a maybe. And it actually took her 3 years after that to actually marry me. So that's number 2. Number 3 was probably what you're expecting, is when I won my pro card. Not much I can say about that. 16 attempts at a pro card, at 16 pro qualifiers. When I won, it was just surreal. The entire crowd was cheering. They were all behind me. A lot of people were crying. I can't really put into words all the kind of the emotion that came up, that how I felt at that time. But it was that's what I trained for my whole life, ever since I was 13 years old. So that was definitely a big highlight, and I'll never forget that night. I'll never forget when they announced 2nd place, all the people cheering because they knew I was in 1st place and I was going to win. Just very emotional. I had a lot of my good friends with me, and so that would be number 3.